Imagine arriving at a place to study where the ancient architecture seems to shelter something beyond its walls. Shadows that do not rest, corridors that whisper, and steps that creak with the weight of invisible footsteps. Hannah, a young woman from a rural village in Arkansas, faced this reality in an old mansion where she lived with other girls at a convent school. If you have ever felt an inexplicable chill in the most ordinary places or been afraid of what you couldn't see, subscribe and comment on your experience. Stories like hers remind us that often the unknown is where we least expect it. In the year 2019, Hannah left home very young to study in the capital, living in a silent, old mansion. The house, situated on a hill with many stairs and old doors, was perplexing for her and her classmates. Gradually, the girls learned not to go alone to certain dark places, especially at night. During the routine, the days seemed normal, but the nights brought the unexpected. Hannah saw shadowy figures, shades that seemed to parade in the corridors, and witnessed small phenomena that couldn't be explained. The atmosphere in the mansion was heavy, nested in a silence that the darkness amplified. Hannah avoided going to the bathroom alone and relied on the company of friends so as not to feel vulnerable in the less illuminated spaces. Despite this, the fear became more present with each passing night. One morning, when they both had to go out for a blood test at the health center, Hannah and her friend Chloe woke up and got ready in a hurry. Respecting the strict rules, they waited in the reception area for the door to be opened, which was in the upper part of the mansion, separated from the dormitories by a long, narrow staircase. Sitting motionless in a cutting silence, the unexpected began. Footsteps echoing incessantly on the staircase beside them, going up and down rhythmically, as if someone were treading each step on an endless walk. The anguish increased with each beat, and their eyes were fixed on the staircase, searching for who could be making such a sound. Nothing. The movement was constant but invisible, consuming the air around them with an unseen presence. The chill down their spines made Hannah's and Chloe's hands tremble, their chests tightened, and time seemed to be suspended in that instant of shared horror. Losing control was not an option. The silence could only be broken by some explanation. However, before the fear could turn into despair, the school door was opened by the night watch nun, interrupting the footsteps, which suddenly ceased, as if the soul that was walking was satisfied with that interruption. The feeling of relief did not erase the terror of the experience, leaving marks that Hannah would carry into adulthood. As the years passed, the meaning of it all took shape in Hannah's mind. The mansion was not just a residence, but a place of prayer, a dwelling where spirits might be bound, seeking the peace of prayers. The strict regime of the nuns required total darkness during the early morning, reinforcing the feeling of abandonment and amplifying the mysteries that were hidden in the gloom of the large rooms. Hannah understood that the footsteps she heard were more than just noises. They were echoes of past lives or manifestations that were in dialogue with the spirituality of the place, holding attention and perhaps calling for prayer. This knowledge brought complexity to what was once just fear, generating respect and fascination for what lies beyond the veil of tactile reality. The mansion remained, leaving its shadow and its secrets for the next generations, reminding us that not all places accept the presence of the living, and that sometimes, no matter how much logic denies it, the invisible makes its presence felt. Hannah, now an adult, lived her part in the mystery, aware that the night hides continuous untold stories. Hannah's story is an invitation to look beyond reason, to realize that a few yards ahead of the light, there are passages to dimensions where time and space lose meaning, and where the footsteps heard in the early morning are calls to accompany them. Living with the inexplicable can be frightening, but it also adds a richness of meaning to the human experience that escapes the ordinary. If this story gave you a chill or made you think about the sensitivity of the world around us, don't keep the silence to yourself. Share in the comments, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more accounts that challenge our understanding of what is visible and invisible. Because in the silent early morning, you might be the next one to hear the footsteps in the mansion. In the calm of Holy Week, the only things that break the silence are the sound of prayers and the falling water in the stream. Sarah, a young, devout woman from a farm in rural Louisiana, and her family lived this tradition with respect. Imagine, however, that one night held an encounter with the inexplicable, a veiled sign behind a white dress and black hair at the water's edge. If stories about the supernatural in sacred places, subscribe and share your experience. Prepare to learn about the mystery that someone paid a high price to disrespect. The farm, surrounded by high and lowlands, became a refuge for the silence of Good Friday. Family members and two friendly couples, almost all fervent Catholics, respected the day of contemplation and prayer. But there were exceptions. Jane, an unbaptized woman, incredulous of traditions, decided to swim in the stream right at noon, breaking a silent pact with the faith of those lands. From the top of the porch, Sarah watched Jane standing still, as if mesmerized, looking at something that she herself could not see. Upon returning, Jane revealed she had spotted a woman dressed in white, with long, straight, dark hair, her back to her, muttering inaudible words. The shiver that ran through the farm that night was felt in every sigh, every heavy silence that hung in the air. Dinner, which should have brought rest, was interrupted by a sudden power outage. In the darkness, time seemed to stretch, intensifying the tension. When the lights came back on, Sarah's cousin's hammock was wet without a logical explanation, leaving everyone with the feeling that the invisible was walking among them, provoking more questions than answers. The next day, Jane felt a lancing headache and, frightened, demanded that the family leave the farm. Her husband tried to convince her to stay, worried about the difficult journey. It was only when a friend of Sarah's mother gathered everyone to pray the rosary that the heavy energy seemed to dissipate and Jane began to feel better. Easter Sunday brought the return home, a relief mixed with the feeling of a shared secret. The figure of the woman from the stream never appeared again, and that was the last time the inexplicable manifested itself in that sacred place. The friend who led the prayer reflected that perhaps the apparition was a warning, a lesson for Jane, whose mockery of traditions may have awakened the watchful gaze from beyond. Jane, despite being unbaptized and incredulous, never saw the figure again, but she carries with her a curious reverence for the sign she received. The experience raises profound questions about respect, faith, and the consequences of their absence. On the farm's lands, the balance between the sacred and the profane can be thin and severe. The story of the stream is a reminder that, in cultures marked by faith, a few steps off the path can attract forces we do not understand, reminding us that not every spiritual challenge is visible to the naked eye, and that life lessons can come in the most mysterious and unexpected forms. For Sarah and her family, that episode remained a silent memory, a story that sees the boundary between the respectable and the profane on the very ground where they cultivated their faith and tradition. A mystery that shows that even when it seems there are no more signs, the invisible is always lurking. If this story touched you, whether by faith, mystery, or dread, share your opinion and experiences in the comments. Subscribe and hit the bell icon to follow other accounts where the supernatural walks side by side with tradition. Because sometimes a silent sign is the harshest and most necessary lesson for those who dare to disrespect the sacred. Childhood memories can carry shadows that never disappear. For Jane and Matthew, siblings who lived in a country house in rural Kansas, an ordinary day turned into a silent nightmare. Imagine hearing persistent knocks at the door and unknown footsteps walking through the house, even with a warning not to open it for anyone. If you have ever felt an inexplicable fear inside your own home or had an encounter with the inconceivable, share your experience in the comments and subscribe to follow stories that challenge what is understood as real. In 2005, Jane was 6 and Matthew was 7. On a quiet afternoon, while their parents went out for a quick trip to town, advising them not to open the door to anyone, they were left alone in the house, playing and protecting themselves from the world. Suddenly, the order was broken by knocks on the kitchen door, a frosted, barred glass door. The reflection of a hand knocking, growing in intensity and urgency, left the children paralyzed with fear. They thought it might be their Uncle Leo, their mother's brother, who worked nearby. The doubt made them hide, unable to react. The knocking persisted until they heard the door being opened with a creak that seemed to awaken echoes in the large house. Barefoot steps echoed on the floor, holding a low, disconcerting murmur, as if something invisible was searching that dwelling. As the footsteps wandered between the rooms, Jane and Matthew clung to each other, afraid of being discovered. The desperation made Jane try to use the bathroom, but her brother's caution made her give up, preferring embarrassment to the risk of being found. With their hearts in their mouths and silent prayers, the siblings awaited the moment when the unknown person might reveal themselves or leave. The tension reached its peak when Uncle Leo's voice echoed at the kitchen door, calling them. The sound was an immediate relief, and the strange footsteps disappeared as if they had never existed. The reflection on the door revealed the familiar figure of their uncle, who brought comfort and security. They unlocked the door and told Uncle Leo everything, who was surprised and intrigued. He guaranteed that he had not left or entered that afternoon. The doors were padlocked, making it impossible for anyone to have entered. The mystery of the visit without an open door was kept silent, but it kept the unease alive in the children's hearts. When the parents arrived, Jane and Matthew felt protected, although the doubts and fear remained. They only told their mother what had happened, who listened to them seriously, as she herself had had inexplicable experiences. The feeling that something unknown had crossed the threshold of that house became one of the family's deepest memories. The night and the echoes of that afternoon remained a challenge to understanding. Jane and Matthew grew up with the question, what entered that day and why? The feeling of vulnerability inside their own home is something that still haunts them, especially when shadows seem to take shape and voice. The siblings' case shows how fear settles where we least expect it, where the routine is safest and the walls should protect. The invisible can pass through locks and manifest in sounds, footsteps, and presences. This story is an invitation to listen and respect the signs that are not always clear but should never be ignored. Jane and Matthew remain attentive to the environment around them. The terrifying memory of that day does not turn into a mere tale, but into a warning for those who believe that absolute normality is an illusion. And they still wonder, in silence, who knocks at the door when no one should be able to enter? If this story has made you uneasy, if you have felt something similar or have your own accounts, don't keep it to yourself. Share in the comments and subscribe to the channel to hear more accounts that shed light on the unknown within the ordinary. Because sometimes salvation comes in the familiar voice of an uncle, and the threat in the persistent knocking of an invisible hand.